The city pulsed beneath Malik King's glass fortress, a blur of light and motion he no longer noticed. 40 floors above Central Park West, his penthouse stood silent, a museum of order and isolation. Every object gleamed with control. Even the air felt engineered not to breathe too loudly. Malik had built his empire the same way, flawless, cold, untouchable. The magazines called him the reclusive visionary, the black billionaire who turned ambition into gold. But behind the glass walls he felt nothing except the steady hum of loneliness. The grand piano near the window gleamed untouched. He'd bought it after reading that music sharpened the mind, but he had never lifted the lid. Each morning began the same, a cup of black coffee cooling beside his laptop, a list of meetings he'd never attend in person, and a single unopened envelope that sat on the table like a wound refusing to close. It was the last letter from his father. Malik had read the first line once and stopped. He couldn't throw it away, yet he couldn't face it either. He was staring at that envelope when Deshaun Parker, his assistant, stepped in. "Boss, the therapist's here." Malik's eyes flicked up. "What therapist?" "The one I booked," Deshaun said. "You said you couldn't sleep and didn't want a psychiatrist." "She's a music therapist." "Oh, what?" "Trust me, man. People say she helps you breathe again just by being in the room." Malik's face stayed still. After a long beat, he sighed. 5 minutes. If she starts talking about childhood trauma, end it. When the elevator opened, Amani Rhodes stepped out like sunlight through glass. Her skin glowed deep bronze under the soft lighting. Her hair, coiled and wrapped in a silk scarf of gold and crimson, framed her face with warmth the penthouse had never seen. She didn't dress for power. Wide-leg cream trousers, a soft turtleneck, bare confidence. Malik didn't rise, just watched her move. Graceful and certain, like she belonged nowhere yet fit everywhere. She set a small wooden speaker on the marble table. "Mr. King," she said calmly, "I'm not here to analyze you. I'm here to help you listen. I don't have time for self-discovery." "Then let's start with silence." He almost smiled. "You came all the way to Manhattan to teach me silence?" "I could have billed myself for that." Amani tapped her tablet and a single cello note filled the room. Low, rich, alive. The sound spread slowly through the glass walls, vibrating in the still air until Malik felt it in his chest. Amani closed her eyes, her head moving slightly with the rhythm, her body in tune with the invisible pulse. Malik watched her lips part with each swell of sound, watched the air tremble between them, and for the first time in years, something cracked open inside him. When the music faded, the silence felt heavier than before. "Do you feel that?" she asked quietly. "I feel nothing." "Exactly," she said. "That's what happens when you build walls so thick the echo can't get out. Music doesn't heal by sounding good, Mr. King. It heals by finding what hurts." The words landed like a slow burn. Malik looked away toward the skyline. "You're bold for someone on a 5-minute clock." "I've worked with soldiers who couldn't sleep because the world was too quiet," Amani said, packing her tablet. "You'd be surprised how much pain silence can hide." She turned toward the elevator. "What makes you think I need this?" Malik asked. "I don't think you need it," she replied, her voice soft but unshaken. "I think you've forgotten what peace sounds like." The doors closed, leaving her scent, jasmine and rain, hanging in the air. Malik stayed seated, staring at the space she'd disturbed. The speaker remained on the table. He didn't touch it for an hour. Yet the sound kept replaying in his mind, looping like a ghost he couldn't silence. Outside, New York shimmered with motion. Inside, Malik King realized for the first time that the city's noise no longer felt beneath him. It felt like it was calling him home. 2 nights later, Malik couldn't sleep. The sound of that cello note kept drifting through his mind like a whisper that refused to fade. He sat alone in the dark, watching the city lights bleed across his glass walls, wondering why one session with a stranger had left his chest feeling raw. At 3 a.m., he walked to the piano, touched the lid, and felt something pulse under his palm. Not music, but memory. His father's voice echoed somewhere in his mind. "Discipline builds power. Emotion destroys it." Malik lifted the lid anyway and pressed a single key. The sound was imperfect, trembling, human. It startled him more than any business deal ever had. By morning, he had made a decision. "Call her," he told Deshaun over coffee. "Set another session." Deshaun tried not to smile. "You sure? Thought you said 5 minutes was too long." "She left her speaker here. I'm returning it." When Amani arrived later that afternoon, she didn't seem surprised to see him waiting. You kept my speaker hostage just to hear more? She teased. Malik gave a small shrug. It was trespassing in my home. Music tends to do that. She placed her bag on the floor, scanning the room. Still silent in here. You sleep any better? Barely, he admitted. My brain kept playing that note like a broken record. That's progress, she said. The body remembers sound before words. It's a good sign. Amani sat up near the piano this time, glancing at the untouched keys. Do you play? No. Then we'll start with listening again. She pressed play, and soft piano chords blended with strings, slow and deliberate. Malik leaned back, pretending to be unaffected, but his shoulders softened despite himself. This piece is about tension and release, Amani said. Every chord holds something that needs to let go. He stared at her, voice low. And what if it never lets go? She met his gaze. Then it keeps haunting you. The session lasted longer than he realized. When the music ended, he found himself still leaning forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on her instead of the skyline. Amani smiled faintly. Not bad for someone allergic to emotion. Don't get used to it, he said, but the edge in his tone had softened. Next week, same time? You're scheduling me now? I prefer consistency, Malik replied. It's efficient. Healing rarely is, Amani said, gathering her things. But we'll see what efficiency can do. As she left, Malik noticed how easily she filled the space with energy that felt alive. Something he hadn't realized he missed until it disappeared with the elevator's closing doors. Later that night, he sat by the piano again. This time, he pressed 2 keys. Hesitant, uneven, imperfect. But they lingered in the air like a promise he wasn't ready to name. Over the following weeks, their sessions became routine. Amani arrived with her calm confidence, her tablet, and playlists that seemed to understand Malik's moods before he spoke. Each week, the walls of his penthouse felt a little less sterile. Sometimes she brought tea from a small shop in Harlem. Sometimes she brought silence. Malik found himself listening to both. One afternoon, while she adjusted the volume, he asked, "You do this for everyone, or am I a special project?" "Everyone gets the same chance to hear themselves again," she said. "Some just take longer." "And what happens when they finally do?" "They start living." He didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted. Less armor, more curiosity. Amani noticed. She didn't push. Music did the work for her. That night, Malik read the first paragraph of his father's letter for the second time in his life. The ink had faded, but the words still burned. You can't love if you can't listen. He folded the paper carefully, placed it back in the drawer, and stared out over the city where sound never stopped. For the first time, he didn't close the window to keep it out. Amani kept her promise and came every Thursday at 4. Each time the elevator opened, Malik's penthouse seemed to inhale a little more life. The first week, she brought rain sounds over muted piano. The second, a slow, gospel-infused progression that wrapped the room like sunlight through clouds. By the third session, Malik no longer pretended indifference. He waited for her knock as though the city itself paused until she arrived. The ritual became part of his existence. Tea instead of whiskey. The hum of strings instead of the clink of glass. Questions that reached further each time. "You ever play anything for yourself?" she asked one evening while setting up near the piano. "I don't play," he said automatically. "You mean you haven't yet?" Malik gave a short laugh. "You're persistent. That's my job." She began the track, Bach's Sarabande in D minor. The melody moved like grief made gentle. Malik felt his chest tighten. "You like this?" he asked. Amani smiled. "It's a conversation between sorrow and grace. You can't have one without the other." He watched her fingers trace invisible patterns in the air, keeping time with the bowing of the cello. Her movements were fluid, hypnotic. "You talk like you've lost something," he said. Her smile faltered, just a breath. "Everyone has. Mine was my husband. Car accident 3 years ago." The words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, the room changed temperature. He said nothing, only nodded, the sound of the cello carrying what neither of them could. After that, their sessions grew less clinical. She would sometimes hum under her breath, a gospel tone from childhood, soft and cracked with soul. Malik began leaving small signs of her presence. A mug left unwashed on purpose, the piano bench pulled slightly forward, a faint warmth where she had sat. He didn't admit it, But he'd started listening to her playlists at night instead of the usual financial podcasts that used to lull him into numbness. One evening, as thunder rolled far beyond the windows, Amani stood beside the piano and said, "Let's try something different. You're going to touch the keys. I told you I don't. Today you do. One note only." He hesitated, then pressed middle C. The sound rang fragile but real. Amani nodded. "Now another." "Let them talk." He played E, then G, forming a broken chord. "Ugly," he muttered. "No, honest," she said. "That's what truth sounds like before practice." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw uncertainty instead of arrogance. "And what does practice make?" he asked quietly. "Possibility." The storm outside deepened, rain streaking the windows, thunder syncing with the rhythm of their slow, hesitant duet. She guided his hands, their fingers brushing. A tremor sparked between them, small, unplanned, alive. Malik didn't pull away. The sound of two notes merged into something imperfect and human. When the music stopped, he didn't know how long they had been playing. Amani smiled faintly. "You just had your first conversation with yourself." Malik's voice was barely audible. "It didn't sound as bad as I thought." That's the beginning of hearing. After she left, the city looked different from his windows, less distant, more alive. He replayed the session in his mind, each note, each glance, each breath that wasn't his. The silence no longer felt like safety. It felt like waiting. By the fourth week, Amani no longer felt like a visitor. She felt like a presence the penthouse expected. Malik noticed how his mornings shifted because of her. The air smelled less sterile. Even his assistant Deshawn stopped making sarcastic comments and began asking, "She coming today, boss?" As if the whole building breathed easier when she did. That Thursday, the light was gold and sharp over the skyline when Amani arrived. She wore a soft brown dress with sleeves rolled just past her elbows, her hair pinned high. Malik had already uncovered the piano. "You prepared?" she asked, surprised. "Depends on your definition," he said, gesturing for her to sit. She placed her tablet on the stand. "Today we play together. A simple duet. You lead with the left hand, I'll follow with the right." "I don't do duets," he said, almost teasing. "Then this is your first." Their shoulders brushed as she sat beside him. Her scent, something floral with hints of amber, replaced the penthouse's expensive cold air. She started the first note. Malik followed clumsily, missing rhythm, then finding it again. Their hands began to share the same space, fingers brushing lightly as she corrected his timing. The contact was brief but electric. He caught his breath and hoped she didn't notice. "See? Not bad," she said softly. "You're listening." "To you," he replied before realizing how it sounded. Amani froze for half a beat, eyes still on the keys. "Then listen to the music instead. It's safer." "I'm not sure safety's what I'm looking for," he said, the words quiet but heavy. She looked at him then, really looked. There was something raw in his eyes that hadn't been there before, something searching. She smiled carefully, professional again. "Progress looks dangerous sometimes. Don't confuse it with attraction," he smirked faintly. "What if they're the same thing?" "They're not." Her voice was firm, but her hands trembled slightly when she turned the page of sheet music. They kept playing, and the song filled the penthouse until even the city's hum seemed to pause outside. Malik followed her lead through a slow minor progression, the sound both mournful and alive. He found himself watching the movement of her fingers more than the notes. She noticed but didn't stop him. When the piece ended, neither spoke for a moment. Amani exhaled softly. "That's enough for today." "You always say that right when I start to feel something," Malik said. "That's exactly when to stop. Let it echo." He watched her pack her tablet. "Amani," she paused. "Thank you. For what?" "For making this place sound human again." She looked at him for a long second, then nodded and left. After she was gone, Malik sat at the piano again, playing the same 4 notes they had shared. The sound lingered longer this time, richer, like her presence had changed the air itself. He recorded the melody on his phone without knowing why. Later that night, he wrote an email he never sent. "You make the silence unbearable." Then he deleted it. In her apartment in Harlem, Amani poured tea and tried not to think about the warmth of his hands against hers. She had drawn her boundaries years ago, after grief nearly drowned her, and she swore she'd never cross them for anyone. But when she closed her eyes, she heard his rough, uncertain playing. broken notes trying to find their rhythm. And it made her heart ache in a way that felt far too close to beginning again. It happened the morning Malik thought things were finally steady. He woke early, the city barely awake, and replayed the melody they had written together the night before. For once he felt something close to peace, until Deshawn burst into the penthouse with a folded newspaper and a grim face. "Boss, you need to see this." The headline hit like a punch. Billionaire Malik King in secret affair with Harlem therapist. Below the headline was a photo. Amani leaving the tower, her scarf caught by wind, her hand brushing Malik's arm in a moment of unguarded warmth. The article dripped with insinuation. Unethical relationship, abuse of influence, romantic entanglement. Screenshots from tabloids followed within hours, then hashtags, then calls from investors demanding explanations. By noon, the board had requested an emergency meeting. By 1, the Therapy Institute had launched an ethics review of Amani's license. Her phone didn't stop ringing. "They're saying I crossed a line," she told him when he finally reached her.
No, honest.
"They're saying I took advantage of a client." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were glassed with fear. Malik clenched his jaw. "This is on me. I'll issue a statement." "No, that'll make it worse," she said. "It'll look like damage control. The best thing we can do is stop seeing each other until it blows over." "You think silence fixes everything?" "It's not about fixing, it's about surviving." For the first time, she sounded tired, not strong. Malik wanted to pull her close, to promise that money could erase anything. But the look on her face stopped him. It was the look of someone who'd rebuilt her life from loss once and knew better than to risk it again. That night, the press wouldn't leave his building. Cameras flashed through tinted glass. His PR team drafted apologies he refused to sign. He opened his inbox to find hundreds of messages, some from supporters, most from vultures. One subject line cut deepest: "Board freezes King Holdings partnership with Harlem Arts Initiative pending investigation." Amani sent one final message before midnight. "Don't call me for a while, please." He typed and deleted reply after reply, then finally sent nothing. The silence she had taught him to feel was now unbearable. He poured whiskey for the first time in months, sat at the piano and pressed the keys they had once touched together. The notes sounded hollow, like something missing its center. Days turned into a week of noise. Financial news shows dissected his personal life like a business deal. Commentators debated ethics and power dynamics. Strangers online decided what kind of man he was. Malik stopped leaving the penthouse. Deshawn came by twice, then gave up. Amani, meanwhile, faced her own storm. Clients canceled sessions. The ethics board sent her a letter demanding a written defense. She didn't sleep. Every time her phone lit up with a notification, her stomach dropped. She thought about Malik but didn't call. She couldn't. In his penthouse, Malik stared out at the city, surrounded by silence that no longer felt like control. He had built an empire to keep pain out, and somehow pain had found him anyway. The only sound left was the faint echo of the melody they'd made together, the one he could no longer bring himself to play. The days after the scandal stretched into something shapeless. Malik stopped answering calls. The world that used to chase him for meetings, deals, interviews, now circled him like a wounded animal. He shut the blinds, silenced his phone, and deleted his social media accounts. King Holdings kept functioning. Emails still went out, stock still rose, but Malik didn't feel like he was inside his own life anymore. The penthouse, once sterile but safe, had turned into a cell lined with glass. He stopped the music too. The piano lid stayed closed. The speaker she had left sat in a drawer, battery dead. Silence returned, heavier than ever, pressing against his ribs until breathing felt like work. Every night he poured whiskey and stared at the skyline, half expecting Amani to appear through the glass like a reflection he could speak to. He had imagined loneliness before, but this was different. It wasn't emptiness. It was punishment. Every echo reminded him of what he'd lost because he couldn't keep something simple, something human, protected from the world's noise. Deshawn tried once more to check in. "Boss, you can't keep doing this. The story's fading already. Give it a week, step back out." Malik barely looked up. "And what do I step back into? Another headline? It'll pass." "Everything does. Not this," Malik said, voice low. "You can fix your image. You can't fix what people believe." That night, a storm rolled over Manhattan. Rain hammered the glass. lightning cracking across the skyline like flashes from 1,000 cameras. Malik stood at the window, watching water smear the city into blurs. His reflection looked older, harder. He poured another drink and didn't taste it. He thought of Amani, her calm, her laughter, the way she listened more than she spoke. He replayed every conversation in his head until it hurt. Somewhere beneath the thunder, he could still hear the melody they'd made together, faint but refusing to die. He turned toward the piano, hesitated, then lifted the lid. His fingers hovered over the keys. He pressed one note, then another. The sound cracked through the silence, imperfect, trembling. He played the sequence she had taught him, his hands unsure but desperate. The music came out fractured, but it filled the room like confession. The sound mixed with thunder until he couldn't tell which was outside and which came from him. When he stopped, tears streaked down his face before he realized they'd fallen. He didn't sleep. By dawn, the storm was gone, but the air felt raw like the city itself had wept. Malik sat by the piano, staring at his hands, the veins pulsing slow beneath his skin. He realized something simple, cruel, and true. Without Amani's sound, his silence had nothing left to protect. The storm that had rolled across the city hadn't stopped. It only circled back, darker, heavier. By evening, the sky cracked open again, wind howling between the high-rises like something alive. Malik hadn't moved from the piano since morning. He played the same few bars over and over, hands shaking from exhaustion, when a sharp buzz from the elevator startled him. No one visited uninvited, not anymore. He opened the door and froze. Amani stood there, rain-soaked, coat clinging to her frame, curls wild around her face. She looked furious and terrified at once. "You didn't answer my messages," she said, voice trembling between anger and relief. "I didn't know you were still sending any," Malik answered, almost whispering. "I shouldn't be here," she said, stepping inside despite herself. "If anyone sees me—" "No one's watching," he interrupted. They got what they wanted already. Amani scanned the room, the half-empty bottle, the scattered papers, the unshaven man she barely recognized. "You're destroying yourself," she said. "For what? Some rumor? They'll move on, Malik." He laughed bitterly. "They didn't move on from me. They moved on from you. They took what you built, your name, your peace, and dragged it through the dirt. I tried to fix it," she cut him off. "You can't fix it with statements or money. You can't fix me." Lightning flashed behind her, painting the room in white. Malik's voice broke. "Then tell me how to stop hearing your voice in my head every time it rains." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stepped closer, her face softening. "You think this is about me? This?" She gestured around, the sterile luxury. "This is what you do when you're cornered. You build walls and call them safety. You hide behind silence because it doesn't argue back." His jaw clenched. "Silence is all I've ever had that didn't leave." Amani took another step, close enough to see the exhaustion under his eyes. "Silence didn't leave you. It abandoned you. The minute you let yourself feel something, it turned against you. That's not peace, Malik, that's fear wearing a suit." Something in him cracked open. "You don't know what it's like," he whispered. Growing up being told that power means control, that a man who loses control loses respect. My father made me believe emotion was weakness. That's why He stopped, swallowing hard. "Why I couldn't touch you. Why I built this tower. Because I was ashamed of what was broken." Amani reached out but didn't touch him yet. "Broken doesn't mean unworthy. It means unfinished." Rain pounded harder. He finally looked at her, the walls in his voice collapsing. "I'm tired of being unfinished." She stepped forward until her hand rested against his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. "Then stop hiding." Something shifted in the air, no music, no noise, just breath. Malik's hand came up to her face, thumb tracing the edge of her jaw as if asking permission. She didn't move away. "You don't have to fix this," she whispered. "Just let it be real." He bent his head and kissed her. It wasn't perfect or practiced. It was messy, desperate, human. The kind of kiss that tasted like thunder and confession. The storm outside roared as if the city itself was exhaling. When they finally pulled apart, Amani pressed her forehead to his. "If we do this, it can't be about saving you," she said softly. "It has to be about hearing each other even when it hurts." Malik nodded, voice raw. "Then let's start listening." The lights flickered and the storm raged on, but inside the tower the silence had finally changed. It no longer felt like punishment, it felt like truth. The rain softened by dawn, a faint drizzle brushing the windows while the city exhaled into morning. Malik woke before the light fully entered the room. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. Low thunder somewhere in the distance, the scent of rain and jasmine still tangled in the air. Amani lay beside him beneath the half-fallen sheets, her breathing even, her face turned toward the faint warmth of sunrise. For a long time he simply watched her. It hadn't been wild or reckless or hurried. It had been careful, two broken pieces learning the shape of touch again. When she'd kissed him the night before, something inside him had uncoiled. Every movement afterward felt like translation. Fingers tracing scars without judgment, lips relearning softness, eyes finding courage where words had failed. Now, in the fragile quiet of morning, Malik didn't feel guilt, only unfamiliar calm. He slipped from the bed and stood at the window. The skyline stretched silver beneath the thinning clouds, steam rising from the streets below. He saw reflections of what he used to be, disciplined, calculated, untouchable. It all looked smaller now. Behind him, Amani stirred. "You're awake early," she murmured, her voice still thick with sleep. "I didn't sleep much," he said. "Second thoughts?" He turned, met her gaze. "No. Just wondering how long before this world ruins what we built last night." She sat up, pulling the sheet across her chest, eyes steady. "Then don't let it. Don't hide it either." He crossed the room, knelt beside the bed, and rested his forehead against her knee. "I don't want to fix you, Amani. I just want to learn how to breathe around you." Her hand moved to his head, fingers brushing his hair gently. "That's all I ever asked," she said. "Just don't make me your redemption story. Make me part of your reality." They spent the rest of the morning in silence, not the old kind that suffocated, but the new kind that listened. She brewed coffee, humming low gospel under her breath while he played soft notes on the piano. Their sounds folded into each other, ordinary yet sacred. By midday, Amani checked her phone. The ethics board had sent another notice. Her hearing was scheduled for the end of the month. She looked up at Malik, hesitating. "They're reviewing my case," she said. "I'll have to face them soon." He frowned. "You won't face them alone. I have to. That's the rule. And rules built these walls," he said. "Maybe it's time to break one." She smiled faintly. "Don't make speeches. Just show up when it matters." Malik reached for her hand, his thumb tracing the inside of her wrist. "Then tell me how." "Start by keeping your word," she said softly. "Don't disappear when things get loud again." She left that afternoon, sunlight glinting off the wet streets as she walked toward the elevator. Malik watched her go, a steady ache growing beneath his ribs. The penthouse didn't feel empty anymore. It felt waiting. He sat at the piano again and began to play. The melody that came out wasn't perfect, but it was alive, rising and falling like breath, like forgiveness, like something beginning again. That evening, he opened his father's letter one final time. The words, though faded, still cut clear. "Son, strength isn't the absence of feeling. It's the courage to face what it shows you." Malik folded the page slowly and placed it on the piano. For the first time, he understood. The day of the hearing arrived sharp and cold, the sky washed in the pale gray of early winter. Amani dressed in quiet defiance. Navy suit, no jewelry except a gold pendant shaped like a single piano key. It had been Malik's gift, simple and wordless. She touched it once before stepping into the building where her name would be decided. Inside, the ethics review board sat in a semicircle, faces detached, expressions rehearsed for neutrality. Amani's attorney whispered reminders about staying composed, answering only what was asked. But when the questioning began, it was her composure that spoke loudest. "You admit to treating Mr. Malik King as a client?" "Yes." "And you also admit to developing a personal relationship with him?" "Yes," she said firmly. After the sessions ended. "Not during." The board member raised an eyebrow. "And how do you define that difference?" Amani met his gaze. "By truth, by intent, and by the music that saved him before either of us ever touched." Her attorney winced, but she didn't stop. "Therapy isn't always about rules. It's about restoration. I didn't fall in love with a billionaire. I fell in love with a man who finally learned how to listen." The room fell still. Someone scribbled notes. The chairwoman nodded curtly. "We'll deliberate." Across the city, Malik was dressing for the annual King Holdings charity gala, the event he'd almost canceled. Cameras would be there, investors too. But Amani's voice echoed in his head. Show up when it matters. When he arrived at the ballroom, the whispers started immediately. Every journalist wanted a statement. He walked past them without a word, straight to the podium where a microphone waited. The audience quieted. The cameras flashed. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, he began, voice steady but low. For most of my life, I believed power meant silence. That control was strength. But someone taught me that silence can also be fear. The crowd shifted, uncertain. Malik continued. You've read stories about me. Some are true, most are not. What's true is that I was broken long before anyone met me. What's true is that I learned something simple and hard, that a man can build an empire and still not know how to listen. I'm learning now. He gestured to the screen behind him. It lit up with the logo of a new foundation, the Rhodes King Foundation for Music and Healing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This foundation will fund therapy programs in schools, clinics, and shelters across New York. Because healing shouldn't depend on wealth. It should depend on sound, and on people brave enough to reach for it. The room erupted in applause, some hesitant, some sincere. Cameras clicked, capturing a man who had finally turned toward the noise instead of hiding from it. Malik stepped off the stage as his PR team scrambled to frame the narrative, but he didn't care. He wasn't speaking for them. Hours later, when he finally returned home, Amani was waiting in the dim light of the piano room. She looked exhausted but calm. You spoke, she said. I listened first, he replied. How did it go? They suspended me for 2 months, she said. Probation after that. But I keep my license, he exhaled in relief. You still have your music, she smiled faintly. We both do. Malik took her hand and guided her to the piano. Play something, he said. No, she whispered. You first. He sat, pressed the keys, and played the melody they'd created together months ago. Only this time it sounded whole, steady, unafraid. Amani joined him midway, her right hand blending with his left, their rhythm syncing until it was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. When the final note faded, she leaned into his shoulder. You know what that sounded like? What? Peace. A year later, Harlem woke to spring. The air smelled of rain and street food. Kids chased basketballs between murals, and music spilled from open windows like laughter refusing to die. At the corner of 135th and Lenox stood a new building, the Rhodes King Center for Music and Healing. Its glass doors bore both their names in simple black script. No titles, no hierarchy, just names side by side. Inside, the sound of a piano filled the open hall. Malik sat at the bench, sleeves rolled to his elbows, playing softly while a group of children hummed along. Their fingers rested on small keyboards, some missing notes, some inventing their own. Amani stood by the doorway watching him, her face lit by quiet pride. He caught her reflection in the polished black surface of the piano and smiled without turning. You're late, he said. I'm not late. I just like watching you work, she replied, walking toward him. Work? He nodded toward the children. This isn't work. This is living. One of the kids tugged Amani's sleeve. Miss Rhodes, can we do the duet again? She knelt to their level. Only if Mr. King promises not to rush the tempo. Malik laughed. Still giving orders, I see. Still pretending you don't need them, she teased. When class ended, the children scattered into the afternoon light, leaving echoes of their laughter bouncing off the hall's high ceilings. Amani joined Malik by the piano. Hard to believe it's been a year, she said. Feels like 10. Feels like one long note that hasn't finished yet. She leaned against him. That's how music works. It never really ends, it just changes keys. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I was going to wait until tonight, he said quietly. But patience was never my strength. Amani's brows lifted. Malik, he opened it. Inside lay a pendant shaped like 2 interlocking piano keys, one gold, one obsidian. We started with dissonance, he said, voice barely above a whisper. But somehow we found harmony. Will you marry me? She didn't cry right away. She just looked at him, the man who had once built a fortress of silence and now filled rooms with sound, and she nodded. Yes, she said, her voice steady, certain. But only if you keep listening, he smiled. Always. Later that night, the center hosted its first community concert. The hall overflowed, neighbors, donors, musicians, families. Malik sat at the piano, Amani beside him, the two of them performing the same piece that had once been their beginning. The lights dimmed and the crowd fell silent as their melody unfolded. Soft at first, then fuller, braver, alive. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Cars honking, trains rattling, people shouting, but inside, the sound was whole. The man who had once lived above the world now lived inside it. The woman who had once feared loss had found belonging again. When the last chord faded, Malik looked at Amani, eyes reflecting the warm gold stage light. "You hear that?" he whispered. She nodded. "Enough." And for the first time in their lives, silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the sound of everything finally at peace.